Donald Trump also talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. Here's what he had to say.
NATO wouldn't even exist if I didn't get them to pay up. But they paid up $449 billion or something, and that's the money they use. They're rich as hell right now. They spent an office building that cost $3 billion. Russia wouldn't even need an airplane attack. One tank, one shot through that beautiful glass building, and it's gone. Same architect I used in Chicago, great architects. I got along with Vladimir Putin very well. I say, Vladimir, don't do it. You know, you and I are friends. Don't take over any countries. I will have the disastrous war between Russia and Ukraine settled. It will be settled quickly. I will get the problem solved, and I will get it solved in rapid order. And it will take me no longer than one day. I know exactly what to say to each of them. I got along very well with them. I got along very well with Putin. I'm the only candidate who can make this promise. I will prevent, and very easily, World War III, very easily. And you're going to have World War III, by the way. You're going to have World War III. If something doesn't happen fast, you're going to have World War III.
So, Jen, let's remind our viewers that during the Trump administration, actually the opposite was true, which is that his administration officials and people who work closely alongside him said he wanted to pull the United States out of NATO, which effectively would make NATO
Not a
dissolve.
NATO fan.
So the opposite of what he just said is true. And let's also remind our viewers that the big reason, beside the bravery of the Ukrainian people and the troops there, that Russia has not been able to take Ukraine is because of the strength of NATO and because of the United States and Europe's support of that organization.
That's right. And because of the work that President Biden and the national security team, Jake Sullivan, Tony Blinken, Secretary Austin have all done to rebuild the frayed NATO alliance. The other thing, it's very notable because he reflected this. He didn't hide his love for Vladimir, as he called him by his first name, let's just note, or Russia. He is an admirer of the approach of Putin. He's an admirer of the crackdown on freedom of speech, on freedom of the press, on the spreading of disinformation. It's a model in some ways of how Trump has continued to run for president and continued to spout lies and disinformation when he has public forums like he did at CPAC. I also, Charlie, what you said earlier really stuck with me about the risks of a second term, in part because President Obama used to say this a lot during the transition. We were at that point kind of accepting glumly the fact that Trump was about to take office. But he would say if a second term is a different thing because he has nothing to lose. So can you tell us a little bit more about what's at stake and what it means, just to make it a little bit more real for people?
Yeah, thank you. There can be no illusions about a second term. I've talked to a lot of people who voted for him in 2016, and they thought, okay, well, he will be more prudent, he will be more presidential, he will sense the gravity of the office. You can't have that illusion. This is a man who tried to overthrow the U.S. government to keep power. There will be no guardrails. There will be no guidelines. His administration will not be staffed by people who will push back against him. It will not be staffed by people who will tell him no. Imagine the kinds of people who would be in Trump 2.0's cabinet, the kind of people who would be around him. You look back at the first Trump administration, which was, thoroughly deplorable, but you had a lot of grown-ups in the room. They are gone. That's why I said, look at what you're seeing at CPAC, because that is what a Trump administration would be like. The first time around, he didn't know necessarily where all of the levers and buttons of power are. He did not necessarily know fully what he could get away with. Now he does, which makes him fundamentally and exponentially more dangerous when he comes back in, and people should have no illusions about that.